speaking from anger is not going to be as productive, as impactful, as inspiring as speaking from, peace or love in a situation, but if we don't do this work and start to learn how to feel our emotions in our body and slow down with them and be more present with them, the anger will talk automatically. We won't even have that space to then make a more intentional decision. The conditioned part of us will just kind of take over.
This is the Workplace Therapist Show, and of course, I'm your host, Brandon Smith. On our show this week, I've got my good friend, David Papa, and we're going to talk about something that I actually did some work with David around, and that is how can we kind of access our highest states of performance. So the idea behind this is we've all got these high states of performance, our highest genius, our kind of authentic self, we're bringing our best self out, but there's a lot of blockers to this, whether it's conditioning, fears. I've been struggling with panic attacks recently this summer as I've been doing more and more speaking engagements. And so David really helped me do some work around that. So we're going to talk about what does it mean to access those highest states? What are some of the practical things we can do to get there? So I want you to listen real close to David's kind of 3 steps to this process and some of the things he recommends we do to start to have us make that shift from stuckness into our highest states of performance and our highest and best self. David, I am excited today for our conversation. Thank you for coming back on. I'm really excited about this topic. You and I have done some work around this, so I'm a little bit exposed to it personally because you've done the work with me. But how we can kind of discover those highest states for us to help us kind of unlock our best and greatest performance. And I think it's such a great topic and one that's really, really powerful. So thanks again, my friend, for coming on the show.
Oh man, Brandon, I'm so happy to be here. Once again, get to talk to you, Brandon the Wise, wizard of executive coaching.
First time I've ever been called that, David. First time. So before we jump into this idea of highest states, for folks that maybe haven't heard you on the show before, they haven't heard some of those episodes you and I have done before, just share a little bit of backdrop and background. What is it that you do today, and what is it that ultimately got you down this path?
Oh man, okay, short version, huh? So what I do is I help people find those places inside themselves that are beyond their conditioning. Those higher states that allow us to perform in the way we really love to show up, that create the outcomes that we want. And to get there, actually, we all have those parts inside us ready. We never lose those parts, but they get covered up. They get covered up by all our conditioning and the things we learned growing up, and we can talk about what that is in more detail later. But we got all these layers of conditioning that are kind of shaping what we think we can say and do and how to be. And there's a lot of fear involved in our conditioning. And so I help people get outside of that, learn how to actually work with that in a productive way, use it to regain their power so they have more, so the more their genius can come out, more their power can come out, and they can have more fun, more joy with what they're doing. And when they're doing that, everything they do becomes more successful and has the bigger impact. There's more love going around. So that's what I'm interested in. And I got here because many different parts of my personal life and my professional life, I ended up being, things look good on paper, but I was really unhappy on the inside. I was getting successes on the outside, but not feeling like that fulfillment, not feeling like I was having an impact, not feeling like I was being myself and doing what I was kind of, I don't say meant to be doing, but what I felt like I was here to do, And so this turns out this type of feeling is out there a lot. Very successful people, very unfulfilled. There's just a lot of people really looking for, wait, I did everything I was supposed to do. I have all these external markers of success, and what's going on? I'm not feeling that fulfillment. So that happened to me. It happened to me a few times, and that got me to look deeper into what I really wanted, who I really was. Sent me to learning emotional healing practices, trauma release practices, learning how conditioning works and how to uncondition ourselves, learning the power of tools like improv, which I hope we get to talk about today. I'm an improv performer. I've been performing on stage for 4.5 years, comedy improv on stage. And I also, this type of work led me to be able to also do stand-up, led me to also into acting. So I have this performance side of me as well as the coaching side. And I really want to bring to people, help them unlock those parts of themselves so they can show up in the ways that they're lit up, and they light up the room and they light up others. That's what this is really about.
So it almost sounds like helping people to kind of discover their authentically best self, but with even more energy to it, almost more emotion to it, almost more, you use the word love, just that being able to just kind of bring that genius and energy to the world that we're all capable of. So maybe a good starting place for us, David. You and I were talking as I was setting up the show today. I said, well, David, is it our highest state singular or highest states plural? And you thought about it a little bit and you said, well, it's really states. So maybe let's start there. When you talk about highest states for us, what's that mean?
It means that you are in the moment, showing up in your full capacity in a way that matches what the moment is, asking what is required, who's there in the room with you, what you're feeling in the moment, what they're feeling in the moment, what's moving through you in that moment. And you're able to hold all of that, to sense all of that, and to be authentic with your expression. So there's kind of three aspects to this. There's the aspect of presence, which means how much energy are you bringing into the exact moment you are with the people you are with? How much of your brain is actually working on things from the past or working on things that might happen in the future? How much of you is fully focused, 100% of your energy here and now, where you're listening to someone with your whole body and you're feeling everything that's going on inside you, and you even might start to feel what's happening with them. So there's presence, and when you're really present, you can access this part of you called resonance. And resonance is where is the energy happening for you? Where is it alive for you? And where is it alive for the people that you're with? I mean, I'm talking about a conversation with a friend. I'm talking about right now in a situation like this. I'm talking about as a leader on stage. I'm talking about as a person in a relationship. I'm talking about running a team meeting. These are the same principles that happen. So we get really present, and then we can start to feel our resonance, which means what is true for us right now? What's my whole truth? What am I feeling in this moment that's uncomfortable? What am I feeling in this moment that I love? Where's my energy right now? Where's my source of power right now? And how am I connecting with the people around me? How am I resonating with the people around me? That's the resonance part. And once we're present and we're finding our resonance, then we can express. That's the third piece of this, the expression. And that expression then is more authentic, it's more truthful, it's more powerful. It inspires other people. It's like you shining your light. It's like them lighting up them. And that's that powerful expression that you see from a great speaker, that you see when someone shares in a team meeting something that's really meaningful to them. When you're in a one-on-one conversation with a friend or in your relationship, and the person says something that is just, there's this emotion behind it and this truth behind it that just touches the other person deeply. I mean, this is the kind of expression we're talking about that's possible. That makes life fun and amazing and wondrous, and where we really feel alive. That's what's happening here when we get present and we feel a resonance and we express ourselves. And so it's not just one state, because in that moment, what might be true for us, how we might be showing up, what's going on in our whole emotional landscape, it might be different from situation to situation. In one situation, giving a talk, we might feel a lot of joy. And so our highest performance in that moment is coming from the joy moving through us. But maybe in another situation, maybe in a team meeting, actually what's happening inside of us is anger. And that's our truth in that moment. How do we hold that in a way that truth comes through and also becomes our most powerful performance in that moment, without being inauthentic, but actually being our most authentic self? So it's it's multiple states because we're never sure exactly what our resonance and expression how it will show up as our truth in those moments. But we have to be able to access that truth if we want to be who we really are and create the biggest impacts we really can have.
Okay,
Is that making sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So I love this because it really talks about bringing our full self, our whole self. You talked about kind of presence, and I wrote down, normally we talk about people being fully present. And often we say, okay, you got your laptop down, your phone's put away, you're focused. But the way you described it was a little different. And I wrote down wholly present because it's like your whole body is present. It's not just your mind. You're just kind of very aware and fully kind of engaged in that moment. And that's hard to do. So that then goes to resonance and goes to kind of expressing our full self. So I got lots of questions around this, but I think a great starting place is what blocks us from that? What are some blockers that we can start to identify and start to overcome? Because I think that's probably a good first step.
Yeah. There are some common blockers, and everyone has a unique emotional landscape. So what are the ways they're putting kind of a cage in front of themselves? What are the ways they're distracting themselves and blocking their own real authentic energy from coming through? The details of that will be unique to each person, but there are some common things for sure. And most of them have to do with fear. And one of the number one fears is a fear of being rejected or a fear of making someone else angry. So there's this people-pleasing aspect to it. There's many of us learned when we were kids that expressing ourselves fully in our biggest, most joyous way or our full truth, we got kind of punished for that. We got shut down for that. People told us, don't feel that way. You don't need to feel that way, or like be more quiet. So we learned this pattern that it's not okay to show up in our authentic energy. And so we started to hold it back, to please other people, to not be rejected. And this fear built up inside of us that we can't be fully authentic. And every time we do that, every time we hold that back, we are reducing our impact and we're reducing our power. We're reducing the outcomes that we would really love to be able to create. So that's one. Another one is the desire for control. That holds people back because people want things to fit exactly what their minds thinks should happen, and where do those expectations even come from? That's more of our conditioning. But this desire for control highly reduces your ability to be present and resonant, because if you're really going to be authentic with how you're showing up, you can't be sure what you're going to say in any given moment. And you don't need to, because you get to a place of trust where you can be you and it's going to have the effect you want. But if you desire for control of other people's reactions, if you desire they aren't supposed to have certain reactions, or if you desire to control what you do because it has to be so perfect, you're never going to access the most brilliant aspect of yourself. You're not going to let that light come through you. So those are two very common ones: the desire for approval, the desire for control. It feels unsafe to be ourselves. So there's fear there.
Yeah. Okay. So something that you and I've talked about was just even when you feel that, when it comes up, where you feel it in your body. So tell us a little bit more about that. How can we know we're maybe encountering one of these blockers and it's holding us back? Because some of this, as you mentioned, we're conditioned. So it just may be automatic for us, and we may not even be aware we're doing it, and yet it's clearly happening.
Yeah. Any time we are emotionally uncomfortable, we are encountering some aspect of our conditioning. And I really like how you described feeling it in your body, because that's the best place to encounter our emotions in a positive and productive way. I'm scared right now, or I'm angry right now. Well, how do you know? What are you actually experiencing? How do you know that? What are your sensations? Because emotions are really body sensations that we then have stories about, and we have a whole lot of thoughts that come with them. And very quickly our mind will say like, oh, that person should not say that thing to me. But actually that thought was generated by the anger. And if you could slow down, you would realize there's these sensations happening in your body that's saying, we're under threat, anger, and then the anger decides how you speak, So you can see that speaking from anger, I mean, this is a common one that everybody can understand. Speaking from anger is not going to be as productive, as impactful, as inspiring as speaking from, peace or love in a situation, But if we don't do this work and start to learn how to feel our emotions in our body and slow down with them and be more present with them, the anger will talk automatically. We won't even have that space to then make a more intentional decision. The conditioned part of us will just kind of take over. So yeah, that is what you mentioned is an absolutely great tool. It's the first response way to slow down in any situation we're in. Oh, I want to tell this person they're wrong. Okay, wait, what am I feeling in my body? If you can just remember to ask that question, you'll save yourself so much headache, and you'll so much more quickly get into a space in that situation that allows you to communicate from your highest state.
So you and I did some work around this a little over a month ago, and I was sharing with you that I'd been struggling with having panic attacks as I've started to do more speaking engagements. And we talked about kind of where that was, and I could feel it like in my throat. It was like a tightening up in my throat. And I could almost like I couldn't breathe. It was like up high. And I could even feel my shoulders like tighten up, and it was up here. So I could feel that there. And then we talked about kind of where to move that. So I actually developed some skills based on our work, our conversation, to shift that feeling. And I've found some really good success with that. It's been good. It's been
great.
It's been kind of funny what I've had to do, but it's worked.
Say more. Can you say more?
So what I found worked really well was we talked about when I felt more comfortable, I would almost have my hands around my stomach. It was kind of closer down here. It felt more comfortable down here. So literally what I do is I push my stomach out. And I'm already a little heavy right now, so I'm like sticking my belly out, but it literally pushes all that stress and tension that's up here high, and it pushes it down, and as soon as it goes down, it's gone. It's not up here. It's not near my throat. It's not blocking me. So when I start to feel that, I just go, oh, okay, push it down into my belly, and then I'm okay. And that helps me reset. So that's
amazing.
Just that process of shifting it in my body has been truly helpful.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so glad to hear that. And that was that idea of, putting a hand on your stomach. It felt safer to you. It felt better when there was like a tension in your stomach when you're in that anxious situation. That was an insight you had for yourself just because we were just sitting, being present with these emotions you were feeling. Yeah. We didn't do any purposeful, like, well, let's try a hand on the chest. Let's try putting a hand over here. Let's try putting a hand on the stomach. No, you were getting really into the body. We were getting very present. So that was the first step of what are you feeling? Then we got very resonant with the emotion. We found out where it was. We found out what the emotion really was. We were able to describe it. You were able to describe the sensations. And then it started to move and started to change. And you were staying with it. And then you realized, oh, my stomach helps me. Something with my stomach helps me. And you kind of developed that for yourself, if my memory serves.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of thing that's available to us when we're willing to start to understand, hey, my knee-jerk response, my normal way of operating actually might be my conditioning. And especially if I'm emotionally uncomfortable and I can see that I'm not doing things that maybe I actually really want to do, or I keep doing things that I don't want to do, or I keep trying to create some outcome, but I can't do it. I'm stuck in this loop where the same thing keeps happening to me. Well, that's your conditioning at work. Procrastination is another example.
Yeah.
It's some conditioning playing out. And if we can do the presence, resonance, we can find an expression that's actually a higher state. We can change how we behave. We can change who we are in that moment, which changes what we see, what we decide, what we say, how we act. This internal landscape that we access when we get present and resonant, that is the source of everything we do and create. So we're working closer to the root here when we from my perspective when we do this work.
So I also want you to talk a little bit about the higher state and when we show up that way, because you talked about it really well. We express our full self, right? We bring that energy and passion to the room. And I think that's important, but there's also an important distinction between coming at it from a place of being generative, where we're really trying to just speak more of a truth, versus just dumping our emotions on someone else.
Oh, yeah.
So we can talk about like speaking a truth that has a sense of peaceful anger in it, but then there's also communicating the same message with rage. So I would love for you to give us a little bit of distinction between what's the difference between us showing up with kind of a more of a productive, emotional, intense energy versus more of a destructive, out of control energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, one easy way to see it is if you look back at different situations you were in where things got emotionally intense and you took an action or made a decision or you spoke something. And you just look at that situation and you ask yourself, which part of me was in control in that moment? What part of me was doing the speaking? What part of me took that action? And you might realize like, oh, that was the angry part that said those words. That wasn't actually my deepest true part. You know, because 10 minutes later, I was feeling okay again. So
right.
What would the okay part have said if I was able to access that okay part, you know, in the difficult situation? So that's one way to think of it is when you want to, and if you're in the moment and you want to say something to somebody, what part of me wants to say this? And you might very quickly be able to see, oh, that's the angry part.
That's a great distinction, David. I'm already thinking of an example when I was on a part of a large committee and I made a statement because I could see where we were about to make a vote on something that was very contentious. And I was trying to recommend we should not vote right now. We should wait. And I was feeling very frustrated. And the angry part came out. It was not productive. I didn't get my voice heard in that moment. So I can see how I stepped back and said, what voice do I want to bring to this? It might have been very, very different. Well, David, before we end our time, I know we're starting to get close. I want to talk a little about improv. You mentioned that early on as even another way we can bring in some tools to help us with this. How can improv also help us show up the way we want to, access those higher states, be the person in the moment that is going to be the most productive for everyone in the room?
Well, improv, one of the reasons I love it is because it trains us to be really present in an energetic way. You know, because there's presence in terms of like a meditation, which I highly recommend, you know. But in the moment now is where we get everything done. You know, we can only take an action in the now. We can only solve a problem now. You know, we can only experience joy now. You know, a lot of us have this idea that like, oh, later, once I get this thing, I will experience joy. But if you actually get there and do experience joy, it's going to be happening in the now. So improv trains us to be more fully with our full energy in the only place that everything is happening and the only place where we can make all of our impact. And that's the now. So that, and also the one reason I love it is because it's like basically emotional practice. You get to practice expressing in all different emotions for how you're feeling in the scene, in the moment. And it's fun and it's safe. Teams that do improv together immediately have more richer and deeper conversations because just the act of expressing in front of another person and laughing with another person without any stakes involved because it's an improv scene, just that makes you feel safer around someone else because you're like, oh, emotions are okay. Whatever I do, it's okay in this moment. You know, and so now you're able to go to a new layer of trust. And there are principles of improv that enhance relationships and create more collaboration on every single team. Like the number one principle of improv is yes and. I mean, we could spend a whole, and most people have heard that, but we could literally spend an entire podcast or more talking just about yes and the power of positive validation and support for the person in front of you. You know, if you're in an improv scene on stage and someone says something to you and you don't act like that's the truth and you don't roll with that idea, it's a terrible scene. No one likes to watch that. It gets really awkward really fast. It's not funny. You lose the energy. No one likes it. Well, that's the same kind of thing that happens in most business meetings with most leaders, because there's not kind of a yes and approach to it. And it's easily applicable in business situations. You can do whole brainstormings. I've run brainstormings strictly on a yes and approach, and people love it because it changes the whole way that people communicate and relate to each other. So improv is the most fun and energetic way for me to practice being in the present moment with our emotions, with whatever's arising in me, whatever's arising in another person, in a way that we perform at a really high level, no matter what is arising. And that's the skill that people need these days. That's the skill leaders need these days, because the world is changing so fast. What better skill is there than how can I be in this moment and show up at my best capability?
What I love about that is two things that I think improv really helps to connect what you've been talking about. First, because you're on stage performing, you have to be thinking about the other person. You have to be thinking about what they're going to give you. You have to be fully present and be ready for that. It's like they're going to throw you a ball, right? You got to be ready to catch it, okay? So you can't be thinking about yourself. So it kind of forces you not to get into some of those scripts or some of those conditioning patterns. I think that's one. The second thing I like about it is it reminds us that it's not about us, right? It's about the performance, or it's about that conversation, or it's about what you're building together. I was doing work with a client up in Chicago, and they brought in Second City. And so I got to see them do a little bit of work. And one of the things members of the Second City, so this is, for those that don't know, kind of a famous improv theater group. And one of the things they said, one of the things we practice with each other is we say, bring a brick, don't bring a cathedral. And the idea is, if you bring something already fully formed, there's no place for the other person to take that. I mean, it's, okay, well, that's nice. Thanks for sharing your cathedral. There's nothing I can really do with that. But if you bring a brick, then that invites them to bring a brick. And then you bring a brick, and you can build something together. And I've even seen that happen in business cases where, you know, the design department brings a fully formed design to the engineering group. The engineering group feels like they have no say in it. And they're like, well, I guess you didn't need us. And it immediately shuts down the collaboration. So I think it's also about, you know, how we do that together. So I love that it just helps us to make that pivot and make it about others and not just about us. Well, David, we've had some great conversation. Is there anything around, any other final tips you have for us around this before we get into the question I always like to ask all my guests on the Workplace Therapist podcast?
No, I guess I want to make sure that connection between what we talked about in the first part and the improv is super clear. You know, what we're talking about is slowing down with what's arising in you, so you're intentionally choosing your state in the moment, and that your conditioning's not talking, your anger's not talking, but you're able to feel all that anger and still decide, but what would my peaceful part say? What would my productive part say? What would my loving part say? So you're not suppressing, you're not controlling, you're actually able to welcome and hold it all, because that's where the full power comes from. And that's what we kind of talked about in the first part, and improv is like the fun training for that. So I just want to make sure that that's really clear. It's like a collective way as a group to help make each other more present and powerful. Yeah,
I love
because improv itself invites you into a higher state of who you are because of what you have to do, how you have to perform. Yeah,
I love that. So I don't know where you're going to take this question, but I have a feeling it could be something we've already talked about. So I ask all my guests on the Workplace Therapist show, so what is one life hack you have for us for how we can either have better conversations or build better relationships, either at work or at home?
My one life hack is called one heart breath.
One heart breath.
Yeah.
Okay, you got to tell me. What does that mean?
It means in any situation you're in any team meeting, in any relationship, to help your communication, to help your performance, before you speak, act, or decide, get in the body by putting your hand on your heart and taking one deep breath. Hand on the heart, one deep breath. You will change how your nervous system is operating in that moment. Whatever triggers are running, whatever conditioning is running, will for a second get a pause, and you will get a momentary access to a deeper, truer, more loving, more powerful part of you, and that you can bring into the situation, that you can let, after you do that breath, this one heart breath, like one deep breath with hand on the heart, just that moment, now you'll have new options for what to say. You'll have new options for how to move forward with those other people in that room, in that situation. So if I only got one life hack for you, if I only got one tip, and I want it to be quick and powerful, it's the one heart breath.
That's fantastic. David, this was great. And now I got to remind everyone listening, you did some amazing work with me in just 1 hour. So it was really, really powerful. So if people want to learn more about how to reach out to you, do this kind of work with you, help them kind of unlock some of those things that are blocking them and get into those better states, those higher states, how can they find you? Where can they go to learn more about you or to connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, David Papa. You can find me there, but also my website is davidpapa.live. So
David Papa,
that's
just as it sounds, DAVID Papa PAPA
Yes.
.live. Okay.
.live, and that's my web location, and you can find me on this web location and read more about what I do, and you can reach out to me, and I'd be happy to be in touch. Absolutely. Thank you.
David, great. Thanks again, my friend, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Brandon. Always great questions.
So I love that conversation with David. Of course, I knew I was going to because he's done so much good work for me. I hope you found that beneficial for you. So, whole page of notes like I normally do. I'm going to hit on a few highlights. So first, he reminds us, this is natural. This is normal. We've all had some conditioning, whether it's fear of upsetting someone, fear of loss of control, fear of being rejected, a whole variety of things that, whether it's in a meeting or a conversation, or in the case that I was dealing with, speaking engagements, we get there, we kind of get locked up. What are some ways that we can unlock that? And so he says that first step is really being that fully present, wholly present, and noticing what we're feeling. So when you do have that moment of tenseness or whatever that happens to be, where is that feeling of emotion for you? I shared that it was, for me, up near my throat. That was what was kind of locking up my ability to speak. And where is that? And how can we shift that feeling in our body so we can really be fully present and really engaged? And ultimately, so then we can get to that last step that he mentioned, where we're really expressing our full self. You know, we feel free to speak our full self in a state of peaceful truth. It's a term I would use to describe what David said, kind of a peaceful truth. So a couple more things David gives us tips around. He says, ask yourself, how do you want to show up in that conversation so you're not showing up in a state that's not the state you want to be in. So anger and rage isn't probably going to get you what you want. It may be what you feel, but it's not going to be likely heard. So kind of get yourself there. And the second good tip he gives us is great ideas from improv. That yes and. Coming in with that yes and attitude and getting others to practice the same thing. So we're building, we're collaborating, and it reminds everyone involved that it's not about us, it's about the relationship or about the conversation we're trying to have to reach that better destination. So I hope you found those tips very helpful for you. I definitely have found my time with David very, very helpful. And hopefully you've got one of those you can take away, start to put in play for you to make your conversations and relationships that much better starting tomorrow.